Chris Hogg here with Digital Journal, and we are at Calgary Innovation Week, and I am joined by Terry Rock from Platform Calgary, the CEO, and Brad Parry, the CEO of Calgary Economic Development. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So we've got a bunch of different perspectives here with the work that you do. I want to start out with sort of like a level set, and so Brad, if we could start out with you. Calgary and Alberta has long-standing roots in oil and gas. Everyone knows that. But there's been a ton of work done to redefine Calgary as an innovation ecosystem, as a tech ecosystem. There's been lots of great success, startup growth, venture capital attraction. Can you give us sort of a state of the union or a mini, where are we today? Like how traction, for those who don't follow us closely, what are you so excited about?
I think, the big thing is, I think for us, look, we've always been and will always be the energy capital of this country. It's going to change a little bit. And I think the misconception that people have about our ecosystem is that the traditional energy companies aren't innovators. And that couldn't be further from the truth. They're actually the ones that have been innovating for so many years. And I think what we've seen is the spin out of that. And so a lot of really smart people who did amazing work in the traditional energy sector are now doing other sectors, fintech, life sciences, agtech, and the Venn diagram, when you see that cross section, you start to see that natural occurrence start to happen. I think for us, what's really changed though, is that the community's cheering for each other and we're pulling each other up. So it's not about who gets what piece of the pie, it's how do we make the pie bigger for everybody? And that's what's really exciting about us. So for us, the core sectors that we're focused on, that we're seeing the major growth is obviously enterprise technology, life sciences going through the roof, ag tech is incredible. Don't forget, ag was the primary resource here before oil and gas, right? And you're seeing a resurgence of that. And the quantum computing game that's happening here is out of this world. Yeah. We're excited about what's happening, but we're seeing now the roots of diversification starting to take hold. So when the winds start to change again, we're not going to lose that. We're actually going to see it thrive for the future, for foreseeable future.
And then Terry, from your perspective, what role does Platform and what role has Platform Calgary played in the startup ecosystem in shaping some of this transformation?
Well, I mean, what's interesting about Platform is we've been around for 40 years. So we actually started in 1981 as the Calgary Research and Development Authority by people in oil and gas who wanted our city to be on the frontier of tech. And we've kept the thread going. It's had a few iterations, but since that time. And so really we've always thought like this organization is about preparing the city for what's coming next. And so we had to look back at about 6 years ago when I took on this role. It was really a time to reset and understand what's going on. We decided to look at what is the engine of prosperity. About that time, Amazon was looking for an HQ2, and they were talking about 50,000 jobs, one company. And just, the group of people that I work with, my board and senior leaders world, and people like Brad, it's like, what if we said 1,000 companies averaging 50 employees? How does that transform their economy? Not just put our focus right on those entrepreneurs, and then looking at what do they need. They need access to capital, they need access to their team, they need access to customers, they need mentorship and support in the community. And we built a building, put it right downtown Calgary, said this is your front door, come in and do that. We now have over 160 organizations that are part of this constellation that we have pulled together. And I think that is one of the major roles that we've been able to play, is just an instigator, a convener of all of these resources, with always the people that are doing the work, the founders, at the center of what we're all about.
But I think I just want to jump on something that I can. I mean, Terry talked about, I think, if you look at that one inflection point, it was that HQ2 for Amazon, back in 2016, because they came to us and said, look, we absolutely love you guys. You have great talent, you just have the wrong kind of talent. And I think that was a wake-up call to go, holy shit, let's think about this now. What talent do we actually need? And I think that was that harbinger moment that said, holy crap, we got to think about doing something differently. I think that's why you're seeing that fruits of that labor start to happen now. Because look, we have the capital here, we have the talent here, and we have the innovators here. So before, people had to leave Calgary to do any of that stuff. Hell, I'm that example, right? I'm the boomerang. I've left twice and come back twice. But now it's totally a different environment because this community is coming together with partners like Platform and everybody else in the community that wants to see that pie get bigger. So it's an exciting time.
One of the other challenges, though, in that we've heard about for years, and it still persists, and we've heard about it more again this week at Innovation Week, is the collaboration between large enterprise and startups. There are still companies here that don't know about the amazing talent in their own backyard. They go overseas to look for it. They go south of the border. How do we fix that?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of making sure that we get the level of share of voice up, right? Because I think there are a number of positions that are open, and there is the skilling programs that we've had, because I think there's this misconception about the kind of talent we have, but we've invested heavily in transforming that super good talent into digital talent and moving that forward, and companies are seeing that. But I think it goes back to a bigger problem just in general with respect to the VC firms, right? There's no longer patient capital in the marketplace. You know, if you think 15 years ago, if you raised 10 or $20 million, you had time to build and scale and train your team. If you raise $50 million today, you're expected to have a fully functioning senior management team within 3 or 4 weeks. You can't build that talent, you've got to buy that talent. So I think this notion of patient capital has to start coming back into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I can add one. I think on the enterprise side, the other thing that I think is interesting is I always try to have perspective. So we're part of global and national networks, and I can tell you that every region that is in this emerging high growth phase has the same sort of set of problems. And one of those problems is that enterprises aren't used to procuring in their own backyard. They don't realize it, because this, like, we have 5x the number of startups that we work with in 3 years since Calgary. And so this is just, it's unscripted. So I talk to colleagues all around the world, and they all say the same thing: access to capital, access to enterprise. The difference is, and it's not competitive, but in Calgary, we are actually compact enough and we have high enough trust environment that I think we're going to be able to move faster on that than other places. Yeah. And so a week like this is an example of that sort of.
Yeah, but it's true, right? We say this all the time. You know, getting a check is great, but getting a client's better. And so the city's actually now understanding that. You're seeing a city start to understand that procurement challenge and starting to look local first versus look out first. And I think you're seeing those enterprise companies now believing in what we're doing, right? Because at first nobody believed we had that kind of talent. Nobody believed what was happening underneath the ecosystem. And now it's starting to move up. Events like this now, you're seeing those corporates sort of go, holy shit, there is this going on now. Let's do that. And I think you're seeing that change a little bit in mentality. So
I was shaking hands on the way in. Just like stood there, and it's like people coming in. This is the first time they've really heard of this kind of thing as well. So 14 years.
We've heard a lot of that this week too. So let's elevate with the good things that are happening here. If we pull back 30,000 feet, we're a big country. There's a lot going on. What does success in Calgary mean? Brad, maybe I'll throw this one at you. What does success in Calgary mean for the broader Canadian innovation ecosystem?
I think, you know what, like I said, this city's been built by innovators. We just got to reward that, and we got to still drive that. And I think for us, when we look at this from the Canadian landscape, is people have to remove the perceptions of what they think Calgary is, right? And one of the big things we've worked on is telling our own story. Because for so long, people told the story of Calgary without talking to Calgarians. I mean, I went to Ontario, I was in Ontario, people would ask me, and I go, no, that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's not that. We're actually a whole bunch of these things. And so getting people to say those same stories and telling our narrative is a key. But I think you got to put the barriers down and people being willing to listen to what's going on. Because I think there's still a disbelief. Because when I travel around, whether it's Canada or US or Europe, it's like, really? Calgary? You did Neo Financial, $1 billion? We had no idea. Or the stuff that's being invested on an infrastructure standpoint from a city, people are just like, we had no idea. So I think it's about getting people to understand of what those perceptions are. It's so far from the reality, and things like this, events like this, and having conversations with guys like you helps drive that for us.
We touched on talent, we touched on Amazon HQ bid and what wasn't then. Now with this booming space, there's a need for more. I guess a follow-up for you, Brad. How do you attract more HQs now that you've passed that Amazon phase? More talent. What is Calgary Economic Development doing to try and fuel it now?
Keep doing what we're doing. Like, our job is to help position Calgary for long-term economic success, right? And we do that through the retention, expansion, and acquisition of companies, capital, and talent. But what's happening, though, is we're helping local companies grow and scale, too. I think that's the difference. It's not just about importing the companies, it's about helping the local companies grow and scale on a global basis. So we work with companies around the world, but when you hear announcements like, the Amazon AWS being here, if you hear about Emphasis coming, these big, large multinational corporations coming here, a flag now goes up saying, what the hell's happening there? I need to check it out. And so for us, it's building that flywheel effect to continue to bring them in, because as much as we want to keep growing the companies here, we still need to bring some of those big corporate players here. And trust me, we're seeing them come, and they've been coming for the last 4 years, and they've been under the radar. People aren't talking about it, but you're seeing a lot of the big national companies, like the banks, are all moving companies or their operations here, some of their tech stuff here. You're seeing different sort of sectors happen. So we're on that trajectory. It's again owning that story and telling it in our lens, not somebody else's lens.
The Alberta business environment, there isn't an Alberta energy, and it from a pure user stems of sense, but and this is what we have. Now you add the story that we've been all developing around talent, around the role in tech and those businesses, and it gives a more complete story. It's not just about Fraxes, it's actually about quality of life and the quality of talent and the quality of opportunity that's here, the big companies that rock us all.
The fun stuff, not just the work.
Yeah,
but it's funny though, because the marketing always was about the fun stuff.
Yeah.
I remember when I first came back 5 years ago, all they talked about were those pretty little rocks just to the left of us and how great those things were. That's awesome, but you know what? 80% of people who land at the airport that want to go to Banff don't come to Calgary because they didn't know, right? And so we did the research, and people were afraid to come here. What if I don't like my job? What if I lose my job? I don't see jobs 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so we had to change that narrative for people to understand the ecosystem that was being bubbling up and building. And now we're seeing that people aren't afraid anymore. They go, oh shit, yeah, I can go and try something and do something else. And I think the type of work companies are doing here is way different than some other markets, right? We didn't see the hockey stick jump during COVID like Toronto or Vancouver, because we're doing deeper tech. We're doing different kinds of tech that has that impact. And so the work that's being done now is continuing to grow. And so we're not seeing the boom and bust around the technology piece like other markets have seen.
So final thoughts, if you could summarize one bold, transformative change that Calgary needs in the next 5 years. You've established this baseline, you want to solidify as a leader. What's the one thing that you want to see happen
you go first.
to take this next step?
Well, it's nothing that we can really directly control. The big thing that, I think that our entrepreneurs that are building these companies, we have had a couple of amazing exits, and those founders are very generous feeding back into the ecosystem. That's going to happen 2 or 3 times the next 5 years again, and those founders and those teams are going to continue to reinvest, and that's how it's going to work. We do our very best to make sure that those folks get the tailwinds to take them where they can go. But I think that's what's most exciting about this is our flywheel has turned about 2 times in my kind of way of looking at it. We're going to start to get amplifying and we're going to see more and more of that happen in the next bit. It's so exciting how that's going to be for all the people that are in this here right now.
2 things. 1, we need to unlock the capital that's in our community. There is a ton of wealth in this community that needs to learn how to invest in technology. They just need to do that. Number 2, the big bold statement, we want to be the innovation capital of this country within 6 years.
And we will be.
Okay.
Great final thoughts. Terry, Brad, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the time, I appreciate it.
For more Innovation Week coverage, check out digitaljournal.com.